All right, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. As I explained this morning on Vuganazo, because I've been sick and ill the whole of last week and I've missed out on producing content, what I'll be doing basically this week is giving you two content offerings per day. Vuganazo in the morning from 7 a.m., or your morning news analysis there, and in the evenings until Friday, we're going to have a episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show where I'll have a revolving door of guests who will help us provide some solid analysis of the news week that was. So I hope you guys enjoy this, the first installment of that. Tonight's guest, of course, is Gabriel Crouse, head of campaigns over at the Institute of Race Relations. I'll get to him in a moment. Tonight, we'll just simply unpack the happenings, the good, the bad, the ugly, the winners and the losers of what was the ANC Elective Conference. Goodness me, sparks were flying there, and many an ego was bruised in that encounter. So before we get into that, some housekeeping. Remember, folks, it's super easy. If you love the work that we do here, whether it's the Vuganazo Show, the Big Daddy Liberty Show, or Liberty and Friends, Sundays at 8 p.m., do me a solid favor. Hit that like button when you watch the content. It's as simple a thing to do, simple price of admission, if I can call it that. Hit that like button whether you're watching this simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Speaking about YouTube, do me an even bigger favor. Help me grow my subscriber base. Subscribe to the Big Daddy Liberty YouTube channel. Easy peasy over there. And of course, last but not least, reminder to you, we have a website. Find us at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can pledge some support to the show. Become a part of that BDL club that we're going to formalize next year, where people are giving between 50 to 100 Rand a month towards the show. Trust me, those funds are going to be supporting quite a lot of interesting work that we're going to launch next year. We're doing a complete rebrand of the show. Let me not give away too much, but expect a massive launch of that. And you're going to see this beautiful Zulu mug visiting more places across the country, advocating for liberty ideas, free markets, a free society, property rights, a faith, flag, family, and freedom type society. That's the work I'll be doing next year. So look out for more announcements towards that next year. In the meantime, visit our website, bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with that jibber jabber out the way, how about we get our guest on screen? There he is, Gabriel Crouse. Baba, good evening.
How's it, Sihle? Very good to see you. December, it doesn't mean there's nothing to do, eh?
True. December, boss, not quite yet for us. I'll only be taking that leave as of Saturday. But Gabriel, I want us to unpack this issue, in the next sort of, let's call it 25 minutes. Really, that conference, as it's playing out in the mainstream media, the various pockets of it, we're being told basically about the contestation, the personalities, and the like. But really, there's more to this conference. And we're going to spend the next, as I said, 25 minutes or so unpacking that. Let's begin, of course, where every mainstream player has been. The players, the personalities. The big winner, of course, one Cyril Ramaphosa. There he is on screen, looking rather chipper. Very happy man.
Yeah.
The numbers are just clearly with him.
Saint Cyril, I think of him as Uncle Ramaphosa. The man of the family meetings, the unity bringer. He certainly has proved that the powers of incumbency and the charms that he has long wielded remain potent. I think it's worth casting our minds back to 2017. I actually started my career in writing and about politics, analyzing it and so on, at the NASREC conference in 2017. And the reason for it was that I came across this polling data, which showed that Ramaphosa at the time was 6, 7, maybe even 8 times more popular than Dlamini Zuma amongst the ANC's base. But at the conference, it was neck and neck, 50-50. Everyone said it's too close to call. And it was a clear indication that the voting system they have in the ANC is not reflecting the wishes of the base. The base wanted Ramaphosa by far, But at the conference with the brown envelopes and the hana, it was very 50-50. And, there's another sense in which the conference really betrays the ANC base. And this might be something we touched on a few times. In that polling I'm talking about in 2017, they asked, do you want radical economic transformation? Or basically, would you like more business-friendly solutions? That was broken up into two options. One was the same policy, but better implemented. And the other one was just a whole new policy for being more business-friendly, more free market. And 80% of the ANC's base were opposed to RET. They wanted more business-friendly. And 20% wanted RET. And it was the same. 80% wanted Ramaphosa and 20% wanted Dlamini Zuma. But what did they get? They got Ramaphosa by 50-50 and they got RET by 100. And
can I put a bookmark there? Because we're going to unpack that in a moment. And I think it's that conversation which has escaped perhaps the context of what we saw this past weekend. Insofar as, for instance, the losers, therefore, we've spoken about the winners. Cyril gleaming with happiness there. A1 Zweli Mkhize, as I'm trying to find that particular overlay. There it is. I'm going to put it on screen in a second. I think it's going to be on screen in a second. There it is. You can just see the juxtaposition there. Cyril Ramaphosa, happy-go-lucky, guy who's had the helm for the last 5 years, re-elected, super chipper, super happy. Zweli Mkhize looking rather glum there. And who else was looking glum with him? Well, the people he yoked himself with, Gabriel, of course, A1 Jacob Zuma. As I try and get him on screen. I don't know if he's on screen, actually. Can you see the image, Gabriel? Let me just
I'm not seeing. Show me some Zuma.
Okay, all right. I think there's a glitch in the
maybe he's
software.
So sad he can't actually show up.
Yeah, it's that. Walala. But in any event, I was trying to get there's NDZ. I think she's on screen. And a one rather glum-looking NDZ, and of course a very glum-looking Jacob Zuma, who is really refusing to be on screen. But it's irrelevant. The point is, these are the individuals who effectively formed a broad coalition of, on the one hand, the anti-Ramaphosa types, who basically were locked out of patronage because they were not on the Ramaphosa train. The second grouping is the Jacob Zuma types, those who just ardently believe Jacob Zuma was the better president and dispel this notion of the 9 wasted years, because Jacob Zuma was fantastic. The other component of it, linked to that, of course, is NTZ, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, or Nkosazana Buffalo Bill Dlamini Zuma, who we call her in this country, because she's a serial killer who killed the economy. And of course, I make jokes of it, but really, that RET crowd, the guys who really push a tacit socialist messaging, or a kleptocratic socialism, rather, where socialism benefits them, but equalizes everybody else in misery. These sort of groupings were the massive losers here, Gabriel, and the face of it, to a large extent, was the KZN ANC, the ANC in KZN, who, albeit, and please, graphic, don't fail me now. There we go. Woo. All right. Albeit, as you can see in the numbers here, had the largest proportion of delegates at 876 in here, dwarfing everybody else. Large grouping, very big grouping, but no big influence. Sent home packing.
Well, they've been isolated. And I think that if you look at the polls, part of the issue is that outside of KZN, Dlamini Zuma and Zuma himself, their popularity has plummeted. It's far more negative than positive within the ANC. People are frustrated that Zuma's not gone to jail, that he's dodged bullets. By the way, in 2017, the polling showed, when Zuma was stepping down, that they would be happy for this guy to stay out of jail if he just tells the story. So to expose those who are still in power so that they can be blocked from stealing more money. I think a lot of South Africans are realistic about the notion that give back the money is not really going to happen, but stop stealing more money. That is a must. And as long as he hasn't given up the information, there's a bit of a beef there. And the ANC sits with this problem where it can become a more rural party, a more KZN-based party by allowing those elements to keep percolating to the top, or it can put them down and a little bit out, but not all the way to jail, and certainly not out of the party for the most part, and hope that the compromise can keep them satisfied with people in the urban areas and people in rural areas, particularly KZN. But Sihle, I want to push back on you on something that you said, because you called them the RET crowd. Dude, let me tell you what the RET crowd is. It's called the ANC. Let me tell you who the head of RET is. It's Ramaphosa. In the Umrabulo documents published by the ANC in 2020, it said the R in RET does not stand for reform. It stands for radical. And in fact, the leader who has signed in these radical policies is Ramaphosa. I say it stands for Ramaphosa. What did he sign? Right. He immediately pushed for expropriation without compensation as soon as he was elected. He has driven and motivated. It got quashed. They couldn't get the votes to get it through a constitutional amendment. Now they're doing it through the Land Court Bill, the PI Act, the expropriation bill, which allows for expropriation without compensation, and so on. They've got 4 things that, if they work together, can coalesce to make it happen. On BEE, Ramaphosa appointed Thulas Nxesi, the Minister of Unemployment and Illiberal Labor. And that guy has driven the most aggressive BEE program. In his own terms, he said we have to get more aggressive. And he was then rewarded after saying that by getting a second ministerial position. So Ramaphosa is thoroughly in charge of the socialist push. And that's why The Economist magazine, which, by the way, endorsed Ramaphosa and the ANC back in 2019, just released an analysis at this period saying, dude, this party is beyond reform. And you can tell because, Ramaphosa has been in charge of what they call renewal. This conference, the theme was renewal. What do they mean? They mean they've gotten tired of this march towards socialist utopia. Not they're going to turn around. They're going to get more energy and march even faster towards a socialist utopia in the style of Venezuela and Zimbabwe. So the RET faction is called the ANC. I think it's much better to talk about Zuma faction, Dlamini Zuma, or the Zulu faction, or rural versus urban. If you're talking about RET, you're talking about ANC, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I was setting it up for you to dispel that, because often we hear it in the mainstream as being that juxtaposition, because the mainstream will sell you this notion that somehow Cyril Ramaphosa is very pro-business, market-friendly, yada, yada, yada. Whereas the greatest precipitous decline of the business environment, both in terms of the manufacturing sector, actual business confidence, and small business, has declined under the Ramaphosa era.
And foreign direct investments.
Go ahead. Sorry,
and foreign direct investment. Gross fixed capital formation. Dude, Ramaphosa, in every material business-oriented way, has been a worse president than Jacob Zuma, significantly.
Absolutely. And let me bring up a graph. Pardon me. Let me bring up a picture that I did as you were talking, because I want us to talk about some of these characters in the top 7, because you'll be sold all sorts of nonsense by the mainstream. Here they are. Here's the top 7. Deputy President Upho Mashatile. Let's talk about him for a moment, because, Gabriel, there is the distinct possibility that if the Phala matter, for instance, carries itself out to what the opposition will hope is its logical conclusion, that is the impeachment of the president, we might very well have a President Paul Mashatile on our hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disturbing notion. I think that his track record is it's a little,
to say the least.
Yes, it's checkered. He hasn't been fingered. I mean, I would just say the worst on the list in terms of obvious prima facie evidence of corruption is Nomvulo Mokonyane, who is lambasted in the Zondo report with regards to Bosasa. But Paul Mashatile was also involved with that in a potentially scandalous way. And there is other prima facie evidence that he's taken kickbacks. I don't know. It's amazing. It's amazing to me that the ANC thinks he is like their best number 2. And yet, if I consider the following anecdote, Sihle, I think I told you the story before, but, obviously the biggest gap to fill was Jessie Duarte, in the sense that she passed away. And So there wasn't a leadership contest. There's a death, and you've got to fill the vacancy. The last time I saw Jesse Duarte was in the studio at ENCA, and there was the DA, Action SA, the IFP, 2 other journalists. There were 6 people debating that night for an hour on ENCA. And at the end of it all, Jesse Duarte went and screamed and said, "I'm never coming back here," because everyone agreed on only one thing, which is that the ANC must go. And the funniest line someone said was that the ANC, it's like a car that's so old, they don't even make spare parts for that car anymore. So if a spare part breaks, there's nothing to replace it. There's nothing coming down the pipeline to do. The cameraman was laughing so hard at that he started shaking the camera. The producer was dude, and that's what the replacement of David Mabuza with Paul Mashatile represents to me. Mabuza, I don't know why he's gone. There's been lots of stories about him being sick, losing energy. So maybe
I guess the cat's 9 lives are running out, but nonetheless,
they're running out. And to replace him, they have a figure who I don't think is going to grab the popular imagination. I don't think. Clearly doesn't have a clean record, doesn't have a particularly impressive CV in terms of any kind of major service delivery achievements. So I think that it's one of those dashboard warning lights that the ANC is such an old car they've run out of spare parts.
Well, let me bring this up in the context of a comment Gareth van Onsling tweeted about the next character we're going to speak about, but I think it rings true of nearly all the characters, where as the ANC declines, almost in its popularity, in the internal popularity of the party, almost in the inverse, rises the popularity of arguably the most inept, the most useless, and some of the worst characters in the party. Let's go to the Secretary General position. Actually, let me lump 2 together because we won't really go through the rest.
Yeah.
Gwede Mantashe as chairperson, Secretary General as Ufigile Mbalula. Gwede Mantashe, there's one thing I do like about Gwede, which is unaccustomed as I am to agreeing with commies, but the one thing I do like about Gwede Mantashe is his stance really on South African energy sector, only insofar as he says the green lobby is full of crap. This idea that we can transition the South African energy market completely to 100% renewables in a very short space of time, worse yet, using these loans and debt from the West, who then still take our coal, is ridiculous. I agree with them there. But insofar as him and his personality, his character, useless. Lump that with a Secretary General like Ufigile Mbalula, failed Minister of Transport, failed Minister of Police, failed Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. Now he's being put into Lutuli House because it's a full-time position. He is no longer, thank God, going to be a minister. He's going to fail there too. Not that it'll be any different to the ANC. Your thoughts, Gabriel?
Yeah, Ufigile Mbalula to me is the more amusing one because he seems to be a failure as you've described it. He's just sort of kind of embarrassing. When he was Minister of Sports and Arts and Culture, he was calling the Springboks a bunch of losers. When he was Minister of Police, that's actually when you saw the turnaround. Before him, serious crime rates like murder and rapes were actually falling. And then during his tenure, you see this dip reverse and things start getting worse. He made very, I would say, crude comments. In a way, comments that some South Africans might find popular, kill the bastards, shoot first, ask questions later, that kind of thing. I think a lot of people feel so let down by the criminal justice system. They see so many crimes go unpunished that they kind of want a really tough police minister. But look at the results. He kind of paved the way for the breakdown in forensics and basic evidence holding techniques to get to the point where for like a year, basic violent crimes couldn't be prosecuted properly if they required DNA evidence to be submitted to court. He really sort of didn't do the proper due diligence and maintenance, and that did have serious negative consequences. I think that in a way you're right to say the nicest silver lining we can look forward to is that he won't be a minister if he isn't, but he could still theoretically keep both jobs, which brings us to Gwede Mantashe, who has always been in the NEC top 6 while holding ministerial posts. And Gwede is an interesting figure. I know people that have been in meetings with him over the years, and have found him to be a pragmatist, have found him to be willing to cut through ideological noise and get to a proper solution to a serious problem, particularly in the first 5 years of the Zuma presidency, when South Africa was in this weird space where we were losing a lot of ground, and partly it is because of the loss of confidence in the country because of Zuma's election, but partly it is because of the global financial crisis and the ricochet effects that they had across the world. And so you couldn't tell who was really to blame for everything that was happening. And there were a lot of fires to put out. And I'm told that he put out some of those fires. But fast forward, dude, like whatever you make of the green lobby and coal, if he was really practically oriented, we could take a story like the one he told about Hayes Nile. Do you remember Hayes Nile? That mythological substance that he went to Australia and he said, you can tell the Australian mining market is racist because even though South Africa has discovered Hayes Nile, which is the greatest raw material on the planet, and it can solve everyone's problems, they refuse to invest money to come and mine it here. And then it turns out that this was like a practical joke. I don't know how it got in there, but you can kind of laugh that off and be like, sometimes he shoots his mouth and sometimes he kind of overdoes it, but he's looking for a solution. And yet, last week he said that Andre de Ruyter that Eskom is actively agitating to overthrow the government by supplying half as much electricity as it could supply. He basically accused de Ruyter and Jan Oberhauser and others of treason. I mean, that is treason. And by the way, there is common law against treason. He's making an allegation which, if it were true, they should go to jail. In my opinion, I think there's a legal argument that they could make that he slandered them. That being as it may, the moment that de Ruyter expressed his unhappiness, the moment he said in back channels before he announced the resignation, look, if you guys don't get up and defend me, I'm actually going to quit. And that's going to put a spanner in the works because this thing has been a difficult project and it requires some sustainability in terms of management. We've clearly been succeeding in at least driving out some of the corrupt actors, got rid of the former chief procurement officer, got rid of, in the last 3 months, I think over 100 kind of mid-level management people who were doing shady business, who had prima facie cases of corruption against them. We're dealing with actual sabotage attempts. I mean, this is really not the time to try and change the jockey. So the moment de Ruyter came back and said, look, I'm going to quit if you guys don't kind of withdraw that statement or do something about it, Gwede, if he was a pragmatist, if he was the pragmatist that we hoped he was, he would have said, okay, you know what? I'm sorry. I exaggerated. I'll put it on Twitter to say, please don't misunderstand. I never meant to imply that de Ruyter is trying to sabotage the country. He didn't do that. He was too proud to do that, or it wasn't a mistake in the first place. And the thing was designed to get rid of de Ruyter. And that makes me think Mantashe's objective here is not to support coal because he thinks it's the best, cheapest way in order to protect the poor who need electricity. Because jobs are only going to come if money comes, and money is only going to come if business can happen, and business can only happen if there's electricity, and that's what we need to grow the economy. He's not doing it to protect the economy. He's doing what he's doing. I think at this stage, it seems clear to me from this week that he is on his own mission, and I don't know where it's going, and I don't know why it's going there, but it's not a mission to serve South Africa. So the fact that he's returned to the NEC maintains his kind of iron-bottomed position at the center of the spider web of that organization's power structures doesn't surprise me, but it does disturb me.
Absolutely. And as we taper off the conversation, we're at that point of the show. Remember, folks, hit that like button, please. I know I haven't been saying it throughout the show, but hit that like button and, of course, subscribe to the show. This is the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Find us at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can support the channel. Gabriel, final question as we wrap up. We've looked at this top 7. We've looked at the ideological and really the ideas that are not of one camp versus the other, but actually exemplify the entire ANC, the basket of bad ideas that characterize the ANC, from land expropriation without compensation and the 4 methods you argue that they'll try and push it in, We'll have a full conversation on this in an episode of Liberty and Friends at some stage. The NHI being the other that they're now sort of really beginning to tout. NHI, of course, being the nationalizing of healthcare in this country and creating an ESCOM, basically, of healthcare. And of course, we've kind of touched on ESCOM itself, and broadly SOEs, which are seen as cash cows by these politicians. Is there any space for reform? Are we going to see, because Ramaphosa's hand has now been strengthened, as the mainstream media is telling us, that there now be reform and it's going to be a nirvana? He's going to sort out ESCOM, Gabriel. He's going to sort out healthcare with the NHI. Trust them, Gabriel, is what we're being told. And of course, don't worry about that land expropriation. They're not going to take people's land or people's money. Are we going to see reform? Gabriel, 3 minutes.
When you vote for the ANC, you are voting for RET. It's one and the same at a policy level of analysis. This is the greatest lie in South Africa, is the thought that as a policy, the ANC is opposed to RET, that Ramaphosa is opposed to RET. Ramaphosa and RET, policy-wise, are one and the same. The ANC and RET, policy-wise, are one and the same. The only reason people still vote for the ANC in the numbers that they do is because they are fed the lie by lots of analysts, by lots of supposedly independent, objective critics of the system. They are sold the lie that Ramaphosa is opposed to radical economic transformation, that Ramaphosa is for a growing South Africa that is free, that is fair, that is got some discipline and structure, and that's going to reward entrepreneurs, business people that invest their time and talent and energy into value-add projects. It's just not the case. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Look at what happened for the last 5 years. Ramaphosa, at the start of his presidency, announced expropriation without compensation as his main agenda. And immediately after that, there was this leaked story about how in the early 90s, his theory about race relations was that white people, like frogs, need to be boiled very slowly and made sure that they don't jump out, but all the money is drained and put into the political elite's hands. He never contradicted that. He's had 5 years. He's still not contradicted that. Look at that guy's attitude towards BEE. His own children are the children of billionaires. His eldest child in the Bosasa scandal was there as a consultant explicitly in order for that company partly to improve its BEE points. How can the son of a billionaire need to be treated as someone who's previously disadvantaged? Ramaphosa never addressed that. He's never been asked about that. Instead, he's given a free pass to do what he wants to do. And what he wants to do is take South Africa down what the ANC calls the National Democratic Revolution, where power is totally centralized in the hands of Pretoria. And he wants to do that in the following way, with an appearance of reluctance, with an appearance of patience and kind of unanimity and equanimity. It's just an appearance. Scratch below the surface, and you judge people not by how they look, but what they do. I grant you, Ramaphosa looks very friendly. He looks like uncle. He looks like the most avuncular, generous, giving character. He smiles so readily. He laughs so easily. He falls asleep in the middle of meetings. That's like the worst thing you can say about him in terms of his look. But he's not asleep at the wheel. He is driving this thing forward. And I am terrified. I'll finish by saying this. I am terrified that just like Nasrec 2017, the worst things that he did was exactly when his hand had been strengthened. That right now his hand is strengthened. He's going to sign the Employment Equity Amendment Bill into law, putting 85% of the private workforce under DISCM-style moratorium powers, quotas, from Minister Thulas Nxesi. That at the start of next year, they're going to push forward the procurement bill and turn it into a law, which is going to allow the return of pre-disqualification criteria so that the R1 trillion of procurement spending that the government will do next year can be maximized into the channels of the patronage network. I am terrified that Ramaphosa is going to go into 2024 with the most overt policy moves towards the EFF ways of thinking, because that's what he's done for the last 5 years. And in fact, the stronger his hand was, the more that he did it.
Absolutely. Gabriel, we must tape it off right there. That is, of course, Gabriel Crouse from the Institute of Race Relations. Make sure also you keep an eye on their news channel. That's the Daily Friend. It's going to be back next year on your screens in January. It's just taking a bit of a hiatus. Gabriel, muchas gracias. Super appreciate it.
Happy December.
Awesome, dude. And of course, that is the show. Thank you very much for watching this evening's show. What do you think about this? As I said, we're going to have a show like this every evening. Load shedding permitting, every evening at 7 a.m. So look out for these, as we wrap up the news day here on the BDL Show. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, hit that like button on your way out. And if you really, really want to keep in touch with us, we have a website at bigdaddyliberty.com. Right. With that being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early from 7 a.m. for Vuganazo. And of course, tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. for another installment of the Big Daddy Liberty Show.